All right, you ready to learn some fun facts? And
About triangles? I love geometry.
That's why I brought it, just for you. Today's portion is very
Okay.
educational. All right, here we go. Let me just back it up just here.
Is the triangle. It's 420 feet from home plate, the furthest point on the field, and its tight corners mean that any well-placed hit will bounce around long enough to secure a likely triple. It's the bane of outfielders everywhere, and by everywhere I mean only Boston, Massachusetts, because like many horrible things, the triangle only exists in Boston. Fenway Park, the home of the Boston Red Sox, is the only MLB field shaped like this, and it's the only one to feature the triangle. But it's not unique in its uniqueness. In fact, all 30 MLB stadiums across the country are completely different. They have different sizes, different shapes, and yes, even slightly different rules.
No rule.
But why aren't there standards governing the size or shape of a ballpark, and how do they keep the game consistent when the stadiums aren't? Well, before we get into the very weird ways that the MLB deals with this problem, it's worth explaining why this sort of problem is unique to baseball. Just as an example, let's talk about the standards that your average NFL field has to meet before a bunch of very large anthropology majors can concuss each other on it. As laid out in the NFL rulebook, every single NFL field is exactly 120 yards long and 53 1/3 yards wide, with goal lines established 10 yards in from each end line. Within 72 hours of any game, they measure the firmness of the field and then measure the depth of infill, that carcinogenic confetti stuff, in 40 different places to make sure that the ground is perfectly level.
Oh, okay.
The fields are regularly tested for moisture level, grass coverage, and even the strength of the grass roots to ensure that every NFL game, with very few exceptions, is played on an essentially physically identical field. And similar standards apply to pretty much any professional sport you can think of. That is, except for baseball. The reasons for this are complicated, but that's why you've got YouTubers like me to simplify it enough that everyone who actually cares about baseball will absolutely eviscerate me in the comments section.
That's fine.
Basically, baseball is old. It's the oldest professional sport in the United States, apart from shooting British people, and as such, it's carried with it some quirks of the past. When baseball stadiums were first being built in the late 19th century, Americans hadn't yet realized that they could all be living in really ugly, identical housing developments in the middle of nowhere, and were forced to live in tightly knit, walkable cities instead. As a result, baseball stadiums were being built the only place that they'd be accessible, in city centers where they could be reached by foot or horse or Flintstone's car. The problem with this, however, was that urban land was limited. These stadiums were being built in the middle of pre-existing neighborhoods and designed around complicated municipal infrastructure, so much like an insecure NYU student, these parks had to get really weird to fit in the big city. These were later dubbed jewel box parks and were known for their unconventional shapes, two of which are still in use today, the previously mentioned Fenway Park and Wrigley Field in Chicago.
Yeah, I knew Wrigley Field was designed differently.